All right, guys, so you are done with page 12 in your Everyday Math Journal or that slide on Everyday Math Online, lesson 1-7. So now I want you to watch and listen on how we take this data from a tally chart and we put it on a graph, okay? So first we need to figure out our title and our labels for the horizontal axis, which is the one here across the bottom, and our vertical axis, which is this one here across the top. So our title, first off, should always be the subject of our data. So the subject of our data, if we look back here, we're talking about the number of letters in student's first name. So a great way to label that would just be first names. Okay, so I'm going to go over here, and I'm actually going to type it so that I don't have any wonky issues. So first names. There, it fits, it works. It's not going to let me move it up, but that's okay. All right, so now I want us to check out our horizontal axis, okay, which is across the bottom. It's the red one. The horizontal axis should be the data you are tracking or the question that you ask, okay? So we are tracking the number of children who have a number of letters in their name. So we're tracking the number of letters in student's first name. So our title for the horizontal axis will be simply number of letters. We don't have to make it real hard. Okay. And then the vertical axis, our orange one, that should be the number of answers, so the number of students. But if you remember back when we were reading about bar graphs on page 191 and 192, you read about a scaled bar graph. So I'm going to go back to the student reference book, and I want us to look at that scaled bar graph on page 191. Okay, it says a bar graph is a drawing that uses bars to represent data. Bars can help you answer questions about the data. The example below is a scaled bar graph. Okay, so it's scaled because if you look at the vertical axis, the number of children, it doesn't increase by 1. It increases by 2. Okay? And you can choose the scale for your bar graph based on the data and the amount of available space in the graph. So if you have a small graph and a lot of data, you may choose to use 2s as your increasing factor. You may choose 5s. You may choose 10s. But as long as you are able to really record your data and get your data on that graph, your scale doesn't really matter as long as it makes sense. Now, if we look at our data, okay, it doesn't make sense to increase by 1s because we have 2 here. Let me change the color so that I don't accidentally add any extra tally marks. So we have 2 here, then we jump to 4, 6, and 7. So there's a big jump between the 2 and the 4. And there's that same jump between the 6 and the 4. Okay? So we could choose to increase by 2s, we could choose to increase by 5s, but we are not going to increase by 1s because we don't have that many marks over here to use, okay? We only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We only have 10. We only have 10 squares. We can't do that, okay? So first I'm going to label it, and my label is going to be the number of people. And if you're using your math journal when you label this, you can just turn your math journal sideways. If you're using your if you're using Everyday Math Online like I am, you can turn it sideways like this by using the hand tool, and then you can also use the hand tool to drag it wherever you need it to be, okay? So then I'm going to label it, okay? I'm going to use my writing tool, and I'm going to label my graph, okay? And I am actually going to increase by 2, okay? Just so that I have lots and lots of room. Okay, now the other reason I wanted to show you that we could increase by 2 is because we have more than this number of students in our class. If we look back at our data, we have 5, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. We have more than 20 kiddos in our class. And so we may run out of data, and our graph may also not be big enough to do this. So that's why I like to scale my graph by 2s. Okay. Now, the number of letters we have down here, I'm going to change that color again. Okay. And we started with 2. Okay. So I'm going to write that 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. Now I'm going to start filling in my data. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to look and see I have 2 people that have 2 names. So, or 2 letters in their name. So I am going to fill in that square for 2. Okay. I had 4 people who had 3 letters in their name. So I'm filling all the way up to 4. Okay. So do you see this? This line right here, let me highlight it for you. Transparency, big line. So this is all 4. Okay. So if we're increasing by 2s, that means when you fill in this square, it's 4 total. Okay. So 4 had 6 people. I'm going to go back to my green color. 4 had 6 people. 5 had 7. And so when we have 7, and it's an odd number, we're on a scaled bar graph, we really need to be very careful about going in the middle. Okay? Do you see that? I went right in the middle. But you also notice that I went over into the next side. So I really need to be careful about this. And I need to try and erase that so that my data doesn't look confusing when I go to answer questions about it later. Okay? I had no names that had 6, and I had 1 name for 7. Okay, so you have to be really careful here. So that's how you fill in a bar graph. So I want you to take the information that you put on page 12 in Everyday Math Journal, and I want you to graph that information on page 13. Or if you are in your Everyday Math, if you are on the app Everyday Math Online, it will look a little bit different, okay? So it will show you, it will have that link, and you'll be able to link the data to the next page. Let me see if I can bring that up from my screen. So this is where you filled in the data. This is where you are displaying, oh, there. This is where you're displaying the data. So you have a title that you need to fill in. You have the horizontal axis down here at the bottom. There's your horizontal axis, and there's your title. Okay. Here's your vertical axis, and here's your title. Sorry about that. I must have touched it with my finger and my wrist at the same time. Okay. But you can also link your screen where you filled in your data. And so whatever you've written in here will show up. Okay? You got this.